Hello, Bible readers. Today, within the Jacob narrative, are these stories about Laban in Genesis chapters 29 to 31. We're going to take these three chapters as a whole. They start with a kiss of meeting, they end with a kiss of departure, and the encounters of Laban and Jacob, they start friendly enough, but then they turn to conflict almost right away as Laban deceives Jacob, which is kind of a news flash here because Jacob is always the trickster, and now he meets Laban. But Jacob eventually puts Laban in his place. And at the very center of these chapters, because it all kind of starts and ends with these Laban-Jacob encounters, but at the center, we get the crucial offspring story. How will the promise move forward into the next generation? And we get at all this stuff in just 3 chapters. After offering that overview, Brueggemann likes to describe the feel of this text because it definitely offers a vibe. First of all, he says, it's funny, it's humorous. It is in many ways designed to entertain. And he says that because it obviously plays to a certain, you could say, partisan fan base. He calls it partisan lore. We see this in Scripture often, where the butt of the joke in the story happens to be the ancestor of a current enemy of Israel, for example. So for example, who wrote about the Egyptian Pharaoh in the Exodus story with Moses being a stubborn, evil figure? Probably a group in Israel who lived in a time under Egyptian oppression of some kind, right? So in telling a story about something way back when, Israel got very good at making their current enemies, like when they first write it all down, making their current enemies look bad way back when. Laban is associated with the Arameans, and we can't really understand the rivalry here between Israel and the Arameans, but they were constantly butting heads, fighting over things. And so the storytellers are poking fun at Laban's people, as Jacob basically calls them lazy shepherds in chapter 29, verses 1 to 8. When Jacob moves the huge stone in front of Rachel, that's a comical show-off scene. I'm getting back to why this all feels and kind of has a vibe of being humorous. When neither Laban nor Jacob want to be the first to offer something in their negotiations, it's almost like a sitcom. That's like, oh, they're just going to sit around looking at each other waiting for somebody to make the first move. And maybe the most obvious snickering moment in these stories is when Rachel, while menstruating, sits on the household gods while Laban is feeling around for them. That would have made people around the campfire, giggle under their breath too. The entertainment value is also enhanced, you could say, by magic and superstition. Things that aren't necessarily, it's not like a theological point is being made by having these things appear in the stories, but they're appealing to the time's understanding of superstition and magic. The whole idea of a mandrake, for example, being a tool for virility, as though it's an aphrodisiac or something, or it has some kind of powers to have children be conceived, or how Jacob breeds certain sheep by the use of sticks. That's weird. Or when Laban says, I have learned by divination in chapter 30, verse 27, when all really he has to do is look. Like he doesn't have to divine anything when he can see it. These stories also, in addition to being kind of humorous and using these different things like magic and superstition, they continue to lift up themes of Jacob as a man of conflict. And his character is both deceptive at times, faithful at times. We again remember here that God's promises have no interest in moral perfection. It is precisely in Jacob's doubtful character that God's promise being fulfilled speaks more loudly than if he was perfect. The drama of the section moves Jacob from exile to return. That's what is accomplished in these chapters. And in the process, he has children. That's the plot. But how it all happens is what makes it, of course, so memorable. Here we have And I love Brueggemann's description. Here we have two competitive sisters, a husband caught between them both, and a father-in-law who's willing to exploit Jacob for whatever he can. Perhaps not the kind of family we'd expect to teach us a lot about faith, but maybe we should expect that kind of family by now. Notice, as the sons are born, these stories begin again in barrenness. The future of Israel, again, will not be worked out by human cleverness or effort or mandrakes. Rachel, the beautiful one even, is barren. Her barrenness is the premise for everything that follows: the rivalry she has with Leah, the ushering in of handmaids, the cause for the names of children. That barrenness is, of course, only overcome when God remembers the promise. The future always, always, always belongs only to God. Chapter 29, verse 31 is the heart of the whole text that we're looking at today. God remembers, God hears, God opens. Her shame, Rachel's, is overcome. God's remembering is their only source of hope. That's why Israel wrote these stories down, probably while they are in exile. Life was barren of so much in that exile moment, yet they could hope because of all these shared stories about God remembering. After the birth story, the conflict with Laban comes back, kind of go back to that, but this time Jacob establishes his worth. He is blessed. Jacob knows this. And Laban's good future depends on Jacob's blessedness. So in chapter 30, verse 31, Jacob asks, "What shall I give you?" Laban asks, "What shall I give you?" And Jacob is like, "Nothing. I'm not beholden to you for anything. I'll keep what I want. How about that?" Jacob departs, richly blessed in a very Jacob way. And of course, everything is then credited to God. Laban receives thanks for nothing, as it should be. The point of it all, again, is that the future will be shaped in God's promised way. No human scheme can do more than delay that sure future. In the meantime, truces and alliances, yes, they get made, but they're all temporary in the face of our persistent God. Tomorrow, chapter 32 and 33 through verse 17, that's what we're going to look at. I am one with my God. My God is with us, all of us, at all times and in all places.